It's important that we respect their desire to live in circumstances where they are not at constant fear of extortion and murder. Mr. President, to understand how important the extension of the state of public emergency is, we can look at the reduction of the murder rate in that area. Since the declaration of the state of public emergency, the St. Catherine North Division has experienced a 26% reduction in murders and shootings. This is not sufficient, Mr. President, but lives have been saved. Mr. President, even beyond the reduction in murders and shootings, it's crucial to note that the St. Catherine North Police Division has also experienced a reduction in illegal activities such as extortion. Mr. President, crime has a negative impact on legitimate business and strangles our growth. It strangles the growth of communities, both at neighborhood level and communities in terms of their economic activity. The only people who benefit from it, Mr. President, are the criminals themselves. Continuing these enhanced security measures gives room and stability to small businesses. It gives room and stability to small children on their way home or to school. It gives room and stability to working men and women going about their lawful daily business. These measures are part of the paving on the road back to circumstances where normal policing can again reap results. Mr. President, criminal activities have been disrupted and the security forces have been able to conduct fundamental policing activities. We understand the influence of gangs in the areas have been curtailed and crime is down. These measures have been bringing back a sense of law and order to communities. People can stand at their gates at sunset and talk to their neighbors. You get the feedback from the people who say, don't let it stop yet. Keep the soldiers and the police there. Life is better now. So we have to consider as well what happens if we stop right now, if we don't extend the state of public emergency despite the advice of the security forces. Is it reasonable? Do we have reason to think that hardened criminals in 6 months have become law-abiding citizens? That we have uprooted the worst and dismantled the most ingrained in 6 months? Mr. President, the unavoidable truth is that crime, especially gang-related crime, has become an epidemic. It's become a disease eating away at our society and our very way of life. And these problems were not created overnight. They won't be solved overnight, but they also won't necessarily be solved in neat 3-month and 6-month boxes. The extension is important. The security forces, those on the ground, have said so. Mr. President, the achievements of these measures so far are encouraging, but we need more time to put in place the strategies and operations that will ensure that we never revert to the high levels of crime that have been experienced in these areas. We've said it quite clearly, and our actions are demonstrating that the state of emergency is not the sum total of our plans to address crime. Importantly, the Ministry of National Security, Minister Chang, in his sectoral presentation recently, outlined operational strategies and institutional changes, policy enhancements, and legislative amendments that are in train and underway. Minister Chang also spoke to the chief priorities that will be pursued to improve citizen security, namely 1, public order and law enforcement, 2, strong anti-gang strategies, 3, anti-corruption strategies, 4, targeted social intervention initiatives in volatile communities, and 5, the transformation of our police force into a modern service. But, Mr. President, I won't be going into these matters now. I wish to focus on the protection of our citizens and legitimate businesses in St. Catherine North. The Prime Minister, in his presentation in that other place, Mr. President, noted that the objectives that will remain the focus of these operations bear, and this bears repetition here. They are as follows: to eradicate the threat to democratic governance posed by organized crime, to systematically dislodge the gangs from communities, to methodically conduct searches for arms and ammunition, to create the conditions for community policing, because people say we need more community policing, but community policing has to work in a context where people are free to interact with the police and otherwise. It can't be where the conditions that would also require a state of emergency continue to subsist. Mr. President, to reestablish legitimate community structures, to create the environment for social intervention, to facilitate access to communities by relevant government agencies, to restore peace and stability in areas plagued by high levels of crime, to restore the confidence of citizens, visitors, and investors so the country can at all levels experience economic growth and prosperity. Mr. President, the gangs are organized and systematic with focused and targeted approaches. And so we as a state must be more organized, more systematic, and throw our weight behind these measures to eradicate this disease called crime. An extraordinary crime rate requires extraordinary action. It requires extraordinary security measures. And the state of emergency is one such. We've made it clear that we do not expect to seek extensions ad infinitum, but we do ask for an objective recognition that they have been yielding results where they have been implemented, and that it is appropriate that we take the advice of the security forces, and in particular the heads of the security forces, on the time they believe is appropriate to successfully transition areas where states of emergency have been implemented to areas of regular policing. I want to repeat the fact that this process, again, cannot be forced into neat boxes of 3-month and 6-month periods. And we cannot allow the criminals to feel that they can strategize and simply wait for time to run out or wait for politics to be played. We have to focus on the substance of what we achieve, and we have to be reasonable about what we can achieve within particular periods of time, given the extent to which this problem has been given so many years to develop, given the resources that we have to solve it. And it remains important that as Jamaicans, we remain united in this fight against crime. Before closing, Mr. President, so that other members may contribute to this debate, I would like to just highlight the two changes made to Regulations 32 and 33, which replicate the amendments made to the regulations applicable in the St. James state of emergency when we debated that matter in April this year. Regulation 33 deals with the detention orders made by the Minister of National Security, and the proposal is, of course, that the Minister act only upon the written recommendation of the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police. Regulation 32 is being amended in like manner. And we wish to make it clear once again, Mr. President, that such orders were only issued in the circumstances where both the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner made recommendations, but those recommendations for operational efficiency had been previously made orally. Now they will be in writing. That is the change. But the interaction and the advice will remain the same. Mr. President, in this context, I now commend the regulations and the resolution to extend the state of public emergency in St. Catherine North to this Senate for its approval. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I am never happy for an occasion like this, because I think that it's so important that we are cognizant of the significance of the Constitution of Jamaica. I look at the first paragraph of this resolution, and I'm reminded that the Constitution of Jamaica says that the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. A state of emergency was never intended by the framers of the Constitution to be a long-term measure to fight crime. And I regret that that is how it is emerging now. It is unfortunate, and it is an admission of failure. Mr. President, last week, Wednesday night in Clarendon, a businessman, a National Water Commission contractor, was shot and killed. The next day, another contractor received 7 shots. And much to my dismay, social media delighted in sharing those pictures without any thought for how his family or his friends would feel. By the weekend, 5 people were injured in the market. You know what was appalling about that report? If the media report is correct, the young man who was the perpetrator took out one gun first, and it did not fire. It failed. So what did he do? He put it back away, that gun, and he took out another one, this time a pistol. The first one was a revolver. And he was able to shoot and injure 5 persons. 2 days after, or a day after, if my memory serves me right, another man was shot and killed in the bus park. And I say in the bus park because when you go into a public space like that, the market and the bus park, anybody, and numerous persons could be injured. After that, I frankly did not want to keep count. Because in numerous entreaties which I heard from the residents is, why don't we have a state of emergency? Why is it that Clarendon does not have a state of emergency when we are just bleeding? You know, Mr. President, I spend a lot of time in that parish, and we are all vulnerable. But what was disturbing to me was that the first resort was to a state of emergency, because it has been normalized. Everybody shares the view that there has been a reduction in murder as a result. St. James has 72%. The latest statistics that I saw, who would not want that for themselves and for their community? St. Catherine North is experiencing, I think, a 26% reduction. Who would not want that? But the question that we have to ask is this how we want to achieve it? A state of emergency, when you hear it declared, Senator Sinclair, every man supposed to feel nervous and frightened. They're supposed to be running up and down like idiots. Because what it's supposed to convey is that the full, strong arm of the law is going to be brought to bear.
Under good governance.
After you have the state of emergency in place for a long time, that is not the impact it has on criminals. It becomes another thing that happens. And states need to be careful about how they use this as a tool, because it only, once you normalize it, you have to increase the measures. You have to impinge more on persons' rights in order to succeed. I have said, and I will say it again, you will never know whether you have succeeded if you do not lift it. You have to have that comparison. And you have to lift it for sufficient time to see if your gangs, in fact, have the capacity to regroup. I remember listening to the Prime Minister when he spoke in one of these debates. And he cautioned us about the type of criminals which you had in Jamaica. I don't recall if it was economists that he said that they were reading, but it was certainly a newspaper, or a periodical, a magazine, which we don't normally associate with criminals. I think in that moment, he signaled to the country the kind of shift which we have had in criminality. There's big money being made out there by these scammers and by these extortionists, and they're not going to relinquish their playing field easily. If we are going to be able to do a proper evaluation of whether this fight against crime is successful, we cannot do so until we have a true evaluation of whether we have beaten the gangs. The history of crime in Jamaica shows that if you remove one person, another person emerges. In fact, it has shown that it is more deadly, because then all the young gangsters are fighting for leadership and for the turf. What real measures have we put in place to ensure that gangs are being decimated? And what kind of data do we have that would convince us that we are succeeding? Because let's be frank with each other. If you have a state of emergency, even with a state of emergency, we have had murders in the different parishes. But if you have a state of emergency, criminals are going to get more innovative and creative, or they're just simply going to lie low until. I have said before in this house that when I first toured St. James, I was told that we were extremely naive, because it's obvious that we have no idea of how much money is actually involved in criminality. The person who spoke to me, who is a stranger to me, said they can afford to stay in an all-inclusive hotel for as long as a state of emergency exists to emerge afterwards. And I am going to support the extension, and I'm going to be quite clear, Mr. President. They will never, no one will ever be able to say that the opposition does not support the activities that will lead to the reduction of crime. We are not going to hear that it is because of our actions in not supporting a state of emergency why crime has gone back up. It's not going to happen. If I will use all of my powers of advocacy to ensure that we are never blamed for that. But we still have a duty to protect the people. That is what we swore to do. And when you go into St. Catherine and in St. James, you realize that there are a lot of people who are suffering and whose businesses are suffering. One businessman in St. Catherine pointed out that after making a very good living out of his business, he could barely pay his mortgage now. We are not only talking about people having fun because Sumfest coming up, or having fun because it's summer. For some people, this is going to determine whether their children can go to school, whether they can pay their bills, whether they're going to lose their homes because their businesses do suffer. And what I'm calling for is balance in how we do things, because we have to take into account everything that is happening in our society. We don't want somebody to have to close their business and their teenage son turn to criminality as a result. So our actions must be so concise, so precise, that we don't cause any more casualties. Let me say this, Mr. President. We had a demonstration recently of what real good policing can do. If I'm not mistaken, we were probably sitting in this house when the onslaught was carried out in Westmoreland. They went in and they killed like 7 people one time. At Grange Hill? Yeah, Grange Hill. And within days, the alleged perpetrators were apprehended. Without a state of emergency, without depriving anybody of their freedom, their liberty, their ability to make a legitimate living. It shows that it can be done. It can be done. And we have to emphasize that. We cannot, because we are in the comfort of our homes and we enjoy the kind of living that offers us protection, that offers us security, not take into account what is happening on the ground. Not because we want to keep the murders of the front line and the headlines. Not because we want to be able to say we are reducing crime. We still have to, it's crime reduction and crime prevention, you know. So I'm asking that some analysis be brought as to what are the results amongst the community. Some evaluation being done. And then lastly, Mr. President, I think we need to have an idea of exactly how much this is costing us. Because I haven't seen any data as to what actual cost, financial cost, is there on the state of emergency. Because remember, we have moved a whole host of police, we have moved a whole host of soldiers, we are concentrating them, we have to house them, we have to feed them, and so on. And I want the data because I want to assess if we had used that money in strategic ways, if we had used enhanced intelligence, would we be able to achieve the same benefits? Mr. President, I hope we won't see this in place for a year. This goes to October. The one in St. James actually ends on August 2nd. And as I reflected on it, I thought it was almost ironic it's the day after emancipation. The government has to think about where it goes, and maybe I'm not the right person to give them any advice, but I'm a citizen of this country who genuinely feels what is happening. Every time I go on Fernley Avenue and I don't see Purnell. Purnell is the fruit vendor who was shot and killed in March. And he got that colorful name because he had his hair one side one color and the other side another color. So we call him Purnell. You'd stop by him, always just the nicest person in the world. So you'd stop by him and you'd buy your fruit and you chat. Every time you drive on Fernley Avenue and you don't see Purnell, you're reminded. You feel it personally. So I feel it personally. But I also know, Mr. President, that we can't continue like this. We should not, Mr. President. And the state is going to be held accountable if after all of this, there's an upsurge. They need to be reminded, if it pleases you.
Yeah. Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Scottman. Senator Brown.
The The human rights of the citizens, Mr. President, they are of importance. And those persons who are not particularly well connected to the powerful, their human rights are important. And the issue that we face in this society for many years, many years, decades, is that we have come to a stage where we have caused or allowed other Jamaicans to take the lives of other Jamaicans with impunity. And I'll repeat it. I will. I'm going to repeat it ad nauseum. We have caused it. As a society, we have permitted it. I'm not saying a particular person personally has caused it, but the way we have organized ourselves, organized our business, run our politics, we have permitted it. Yes, it's a fact that the way that the society has been organized has in fact facilitated this very sad situation. I have been here, Mr. President, and I've said that we, or many communities, have been living under an unofficial state of emergency for years. And if you drive through some of them, where the buildings have been converted to shells, what used to be dress shops people are squatting in them. What used to be machine shops no longer exist because of shootings. Where there were street lights, their persons have shut them out, Mr. President. Where people were not permitted to congregate, to meet in the square, to socialize, or even to go to church. And that, Mr. President, was not declared by the Governor General. It is other forces who have imposed that lifestyle on a great amount of Jamaican people. I don't know if it is as a result, but one of the things that has bothered me in the last many months is the nature of the Jamaican. What is it that the Jamaican is becoming? How is it that he feels for his colleagues and fellow citizens? Some of us, Mr. President, we have given up this neighborliness where we are concerned about each other. We prey on the vulnerable nowadays. So if you are young, if you are old, if you are poor, some of us use that as an opportunity to make an advantage for ourselves. And so we have that situation and the numbers. And I mean, Senator Scott Motley made the point that it is a personal thing. But so far, when you speak to persons and when you go to the yards of persons who have lost their loved ones in this situation, and you see the tears and the destruction, and it lasts forever. It lasts long after the night and a big funeral service and so on, when all of us gone home, and then that breadwinner is not available at all. It lasts sometimes for generations. And so that is the effect that it is having on our society, Mr. President, denying Jamaicans of their right to live, denying Jamaicans of their human rights, their right to make a living. I agree. And before I even get to the state of agreement, I want to touch the word crime. Because I am no criminologist or expert on crime fighting, but I want to think that the word crime shouldn't be used for some of the activities that is carried on by some of these marauding gangs. it appears almost paramilitary. Crime, it appears to me, not being a scientist in the area, is person losing their temper at the domino table and getting a fight. Maybe a robbery or something, or a football field situation, some indisciplined youngster getting a fight and so forth. And occasionally you have persons who may use a firearm to hold up people and maybe even shoot persons. But where we have organized killing and so forth, I wonder if it is appropriate simply to call it crime. And I ask that question because there are certain crime fighting strategies that I use for what I call regular crime. That it appears to me for the type of crime that we have and we are trying to suppress, that regularity of circumstances may not be adequate. Mr. President, you bear in mind that the way we fight crime results in witnesses, often live witnesses. And it is easy for me to criticize a Jamaican who says, I'm not going to give evidence because I have been threatened. Or you don't even have to threaten me, Mr. President. Sometimes the person who sees the crime did not receive a direct threat, but the culture is such that I fear that I'm going to lose my life and that of my family. If you don't have witnesses to come forward, how then do you address the situation? So we now have a situation where the criminals appear to have gotten ahead of us, and we need now to come to a place where we need to catch up. We need to catch up. They have gotten out of the blocks, and we need a breather, a breathing space. The state of emergency, I agree, should not be here for 10 years or 5 years or whatever. It's not a permanent fixture. It's not a permanent fixture. But it must permit you as a state to catch up, breathe in space. Because what it does, you know, Mr. President, whether we like it or not, it permits the authorities who intelligence, and sometimes the authorities, the police and the military, they get it wrong. And they take, some persons do, we know, that are not properly dealt with. Unfortunately, this is not happening much under these states of emergencies, and the system appears to be working. But then, if you have intelligence of persons who are violence producers, but you don't have the evidence in the technical sense, so that the security forces may be well aware that John is a violence producer. He's organizing crime and murder, but you cannot arrest him so that he's charged and so on, because that evidence is not there. But you understand that if you are able to remove him from the circumstances without itself taking his life, it will give you a breathing space and so on for you to do other things necessary. So the way I see the state of emergency is a catch-up. It allows the state to catch up with the criminals, to get a breathing space, to organize itself, to put in place much of what is being done, to allow the security forces, the resources, to remove those even temporarily so that we can get a breather. And of course, every life that is saved as a result is more than worth it. So that while I would have preferred that we don't have states of emergency, we have come to such a time as this. And it is an appropriate remedy for such a time as this. And therefore, even though I understand the negatives of state of emergency, I feel in my heart that it is the right thing to do. And I feel that if we take advantage of this respite that is given to us, we will be in a better place. So I don't really suffer too much when the time comes to say yes to the expansion of a state of emergency in this particular area, because I know that it is, at the end of the day, on balance, to the advantage of the people of Jamaica. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, Senator Brown. Senator Gill, give me a minute, please. Thank you, Senator Brown. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, it has been 6 months since the state of emergency was declared, or pretty near 6 months, in St. James. It's 3 months of the state of emergency in St. Catherine North. That's a reasonable amount of time for us to evaluate the successes or failure or otherwise of these security measures. We'd have hoped that the government would come to us today and show the progress that is being made. They have said the measure they are banking on is that there's a reduction in murders over last year. A reduction in murder over last year. They haven't come to us to say we have disrupted and dismantled the following gangs in St. James or the following gangs in North St. Catherine. How do we, Senator Webby, measure success if we don't have the data and the content? How do we measure success if you don't tell us how many guns you move from St. Catherine North or St. James? In fact, I believe the number of guns from St. Catherine North is less than 10. I don't know how much on Montego Bay, but the point the leader of the opposition business was making is that part of the success is because people have taken a holiday from crime. You don't remove the guns, you don't remove the criminal organization, and you claim success. Well, for me, that cannot be the measure of success. Mr. President, last Sunday, 6 a.m. into Monday morning, 6 a.m., 7 murders occurred in our country in that 24-hour space. So in any day under the state of emergency and Zozo in the country, we could have had 7 murders, as we did on Sunday. Yes, on Monday into Tuesday, we had 3. But the average over those 2 days, and that is this week past. This week we're in, not past yet. That's 5 per day on average for those first 2 days. And I can't go beyond that because I don't have the data for the other days. Tuesday to Wednesday, Wednesday to Thursday, Thursday to Friday. But the police have the data. And one thing I'd like to recommend, Mr. President, is that the data on crime regularly put out by the police must be circulated to all parliamentarians and to the media. Transparency ought to be. And Senator Reid, I'd love to see more press briefing where you can report on the number of murders, low or high or medium. We can't rely on social media for the data that the police have. So I was fortunate to get those data for Tuesday and Monday, but not from the government. Mr. President, as the leader of opposition said on Tuesday night when this matter was debated, just meters from the back gate of King's House, a businessman recently was murdered in broad daylight. I speak of Mr. Brandon Murray. And we mourn with his family and friends. And this is despite Senator Ramsford, the state of emergencies. In Palmer's Cross, a man by the name of Smoker, and that's a name I saw the police put out as a person of interest, was murdered in broad daylight. Murdered in broad daylight. Mr. President, we know of the case that has gone abroad of the couple returning from England out in West Portland. So the crime situation is still out of hand. And just to put it in context, I know speakers will say to us, but there's a 10% reduction in murder from January to June this year over last year. That's true. But last year was a very high bar, 1,616. I'd like to see you compare this year to 2016, when we had 581 murders for the same period, January 1st to June 23rd this year. I'd like to see us compare this year figure with 2015 figure of 565, or 84 less murders for the same period. I'd like to see us compare it with 2014, when we had 474 murders, 174 less than current. In other words, Senator Webby, mediocrity can't be the measurement of success. Mediocrity cannot be the measure of success. We can't say because we are less than the worst, the third worst year, that we're making progress. That's not progress. Progress is when you compare to your best year of 2014, for example. That's how we must measure it. It would be better if we could compare to years gone by. So don't hug up, don't embrace mediocrity. Let us strive for the best in our fight against crime. Mr. President, just last week, a relative of two members of our Senate, this Senate, a relative of two members of this Senate was a victim of gunmen. But for the grace of God, Uncle Ronnie, she remains alive today.
Brother Damien.
And Brother Damien. But for the grace of God, she's alive. But for the grace of God, all 21 of us do not need to go to the funeral in solidarity with our colleagues who sit on both sides of the sides. We give thanks to the Lord for that. But let us be clear, this criminal thing has gotten close to us. And if we can't defend by our policies our own relatives, what can the society expect of us as parliamentarians in terms of protecting them? Think about that. Think about that. It's closer to us. But you know, Mr. President, let us be clear. Young Georgia put up a fight, a gallant fight against those criminal gunmen. She resisted. Courage she displayed. Well, you know what, Mr. President? Having resisted and the criminals having gotten their loot and trying to escape, crashed, she was able to call the police, report the crime. But the police response was, we have no vehicle to come and check.
Yeah, man, you have 400 used car.
We have no vehicle. A relative of 2 members of the Senate. The police couldn't find a vehicle. No. And I'm not arguing that because she was a relative of 2 members of the Senate. I am saying if it happened in that context, can you imagine the poor people all around? Can you imagine the lady who called me yesterday morning and said they came and saw off of the electric gate of a friend of hers, took away her car, and she called the Constant Spring police, and it's daylight they come. That's what is happening to our people in this country. 2 states of emergency, 2 Zozo, but we're not safe. So let us be clear. Now, Mr. President, the young lady was told there is no vehicle. But I recall that last year in this Senate, I voted yes to a budget that had 400 million plus to buy cars for the police. What has happened to those cars? What has happened to those cars? We were told for every new car, we could get 4 used cars. So where are the cars that could have gotten the police to apprehend those criminals and prevent them from striking again at some other citizen of the country? No cars. What happened to those vehicles? Mr. President, those vehicles were caught up in what a member in the other place has described as the mother of all bandulos. The mother of all bandulos. That mother of all bandulos used car scheme is now before the fraud squad. And the question has to be asked, is this another case of corruption, driving crime, and supporting the criminals out there because corruption deprived the state of the resources it needs to bring the criminals to book? Mr. President, I'd have preferred today, in support of that young relative of our Senate colleagues, that we were discussing a state of emergency against public corruption today. Because, make no doubt about it, public corruption and aids crime and undermine the safety and security of our people. I need a state of emergency against public corruption. Mr. President, I would love to have seen the cars from the mothers of all Bandulu scheme being available. Mr. President, last time I spoke in the Senate, some members on the other side frowned when I spoke about the corruption elsewhere. Spoke about the fence at Petrojam. I spoke about the consultant at Petrojam. They frowned. But today I'm happy. MOCA, Auditor General, Integrity Commission has followed the lead and has gone in to Petrojam. So I'm not afraid of people frowning. I say to my friends on the other side, lift your integrity flag high and do not support the type of things that have taken place in that agency. Mr. President, cars are needed to assist the police in fighting and making the state of emergency successful. Think how many cars could be donated to the police by Petrojam from the 66 million overspend on the fence. And let nobody call it a wall, because a wall is where you can't see through. It's a fence you can see through. 66 million overrun could provide 30 new cars for our police. And they could have police cars going in Bridgeport, St. Catherine, to track the criminal who attacked a relative of 2 members of the Senate. But also to go after those in Maypen, which is bleeding. And in other areas in the country where police need cars to go and fight the criminals. We need a state of public emergency against corruption in the country. Mr. President, think how much cars for our police force could have been purchased with the $17,000 per month or $26 million per year for a consultant to attend meetings, a consultant who were told by PCJ that they have people, Senator Webby, who could do the work. That 26 million could buy 13 cars. So it's not that we don't have the resources. It's how the corrupt have been using those resources. So, President, think of the $9 million allegedly rejected by the residents of Makuk spend. That Petrojam transfer, we are told, to other sources. Think about the 4 or 5 cars that could buy for the police. That's how we need to fight crime. Not just having long lines of traffic going into St. Catherine. Not delay the working people. Not mashing up small people business, but providing the resources to the police force rather than squandering it in corruption that we're seeing around us. Mr. President, think of the $10 million missing from Nutrition Product Limited. And we have not heard from the Minister of Education what has happened to the general manager there. Is he still there, Minister? The children. Is he still there? You mean don't sound like, what's the other man's name? Oh, don't sound like the other man. I'm not going to say no walk. No. Don't sound like the other man who don't know what is happening. Go check it out. Is the general manager who was there a couple of months ago still there? Why has he left? 10 million missing. And I know the Auditor General is there too. So you need to know that. Maybe that's why we're not having any press briefing. Robbing the children. So what has happened to that? Oh God, man. Children. Mr. President, I'm ashamed, man. Recently, we have heard of a public sector employee responsible for a program under the Ministry of Energy, Science, Energy and Technology, responsible for a program of 239 million Jamaican dollars. And we have heard that somebody with the same name, and we are told worked at Nessal, was arrested with 35 million, or is it $85 million cash in Walaba?
You know, Senator Brown, a couple weeks ago when somebody raised a matter that was...
That you allowed?
No, hold on, man. That was dealing with that issue. You got up and said that I shouldn't allow the debate because it is customary that we don't discuss matters that are heading to the police. That matter is in the court. So you have raised it. Could you move on and not interfere with it anymore?
Mr. President, if you rule that that's a matter that I should not raise, because I'm not dealing about the issue. I'm dealing about just a fact. I heard the minister...
Hold on a little bit. It's not a fact. There is no fact. The matter is before the court for the court to determine whether or not there are facts.
Mr. President, are you saying the police are lying? The police are lying?
What I'm saying, what I'm saying is that the police make an allegation, the matter goes before the court, and the court determines the fact.
All right. So there's an allegation of 35 or $85 million cash. That's allegation is what I'm dealing with. Now, Mr. President, people are asking what kind of money that? And when I asked that, they said, what kind of money? And I said, no, I meant, what kind of money that? But they said, no, Wakanda money. And I just trying to understand, what is Wakanda? Or who is Wakanda? Tell me, school. So, Mr. President, I am deeply concerned. Having passed a law saying you mustn't spend more than $1 million in cash, to see people in the country having as much as $85 million in cash, according to the allegations by the police. I have heard the Minister of National Security on Tuesday night in this parliament describe that scene in a certain way that I cringe that the speaker allowed it because the word criminal was used. Well, I will not use it here.
I'm not going to allow it. So
and I'm not going to use it either.
You made your point.
I'm not going to use it. Now, Mr. President, the Prime Minister on Tuesday, discussing this resolution in the other place, said, the small man on the corner can't buy guns. And I agree with him. But $85 million, the type of Wakanda money, can buy guns. And I wonder if we here know what that type of cash can buy in the black market. Wakanda-ism, we need to get rid of out of Jamaica. We need a state of emergency against Wakanda-ism. Yeah. Mr. President, let us be clear. The Prime Minister of Jamaica is on record of saying people must earn the trust of the Jamaican people. And I am concerned, and I have said to my colleagues on this side, that I'm conflicted when it comes to the vote. Why am I conflicted? The Prime Minister is the mover of this resolution. But I look to see the Prime Minister's attitude to what is happening in the Ministry of Energy. And I ask myself, can I transfer that attitude to the ministry, in the Ministry of Mining, to my support for the state of emergency vote? I tell you why. In 2013, there was an Andrew Michael Onis who felt that Richard Azan took too long to resign. As he said then, good sense has prevailed now that Azan resigned. Prime Minister, Andrew Michael Onis held a press conference at his West Kings House office of the leader, West Kings House Road office of the leader of the opposition, and said that if Azan did not resign by next Tuesday, the Jamaica Labour Party would not cooperate with government inside and outside of Garden House. Mr. Andrew Michael Onis went on to say, is reported to have said that by refusing to remove Azan, following the table in Parliament of the Contractor General's report and the illegal construction and renting of the shops, Prime Minister Portia Simsimila had signaled to her ministers that it is not an indictment on Azan. Andrew Michael Onis continued to have said that it's far greater indictment on the Prime Minister in keeping Azan in her cabinet, and Azan was in the cabinet, and giving the green light to her ministers that they can act in ways that breach public trust and faith and retain their position in the government. He continued, in effect, the Prime Minister is now sitting over a corrupt government. All this continued by saying the opposition will ensure that the country's system of government is held to the high standard of public trust and accountability. Where is this Andrew Onis?
A point of order.
Where is this Andrew Onis?
Mr. Here's a point of order.
Mr. President, I have heard my colleague remarking about an administration in the past, a PNP administration, and I don't think the remarks speaking about the corruption or discussions of corruption of a past PNP administration relate to the state of emergency. He's straying from the topic, and I ask that you
The question is one of relevance. Senator Charles, in truth and in fact, Senator Brown, if that wasn't, the point of order wasn't taken, I would have sort of asked you to get back to the motion presently before us. So continue for me, please, but stick to the...
Mr. President, I thought you're finished. You know I'm not going to stand if you're sitting and talking to me.
You have obviously been speaking to President President Morris. You have a lot of latitude and you have taken advantage of it. But just stick to the motion, please.
Mr. President, you're asking me to give my consent and advice to a resolution moved by the Prime Minister. And I want to know that my Prime Minister, who asked me to support this, is one who believes that if a member of his cabinet breaches the public trust and faith, that he's going to deter, he's going to procrastinate, and he's going to try and find ways not to deal with the corruption. Because out there, people believe that we're condoning Wakandaism. The Wakandaism cannot be supported, because I don't know if when I vote yes for this, I'm voting for Wakandaism. That's the issue I have. Wakandaism must go. It is time for the Prime Minister to fire Andrew Wheatley for his loss of public trust. That's what is needed, because otherwise the Prime Minister will be seen as living in a different skin from the one he was in 2013. When I listened to him on Tuesday night, finding excuse.
Mr. President, again, another point of order. I was hoping, Mr. President, that my colleague senator was finished, and I heard him take a breath. But clearly the inhale led to another exhale of things which have nothing to do with what is before us. I understand his concerns. There are concerns that we have shared. But this today is not about that. And he's using an opportunity to divert from the attention of what's before the Senate. I ask, Mr. President, that you narrow what he's doing.
Corruption and crime link is a wide motion.
Point of order, Mr. Yes, because the member, Mr. President, have made repeated allegations in relation to NPL. Now, I'm asking to put the matter on the record for him to retract unless he has, if he's alleging, or is it in fact, he's saying in fact that there is missing $10 million at NPL. My information, however, is, yes, I have to correct the record, that we have no knowledge of that. It is correct that the auditors are there, Mr. President, to make sure that all that is verified. We have a team of auditors. The Minister of Finance has been down there, and we at this point cannot verify those allegations. The member has repeated that allegation on several sittings of the Senate, and unless he has evidence,
where's the point order?
1 minute. 1 minute, please.
The member is misleading the Senate.
Senator Reid, I have to just deal with these things one at a time. There is a point of order, Senator Brown, that you are straying from the debate on the motion with respect to the state of emergency. And I asked you before to stick to the relevance as it relates to the question of the motion before you. I asked you once, I'm going to ask you again to do it so that I don't have to intervene otherwise. Hang on a minute for me, please. Wait a minute for me. So that is in relation to Senator Charles's point of order. I find merit in it. In relation to the point of order raised by my colleague, Senator Reid. What he's really seeking to do is to make a clarification. He's seeking to make a clarification. It is not a point of order. In due course, no doubt he will rise during the course of the debate and correct what you have said. So what I'm going to ask is that you pay attention to my ruling with respect to the relevance of your contribution to the debate.
Can I have your assurance?
It don't require an argument, you know.
No, I'm making a request of you. All of these points of order and clarification has eaten into the time allotted to me. What I'm asking you is to restore that as extra time.
It's like football, a referee. Yeah, man.
That's all I'm asking you.
Allows it, yes. Yes, standing order allows it, man. Stop it,
Senator Brown.
I don't want to be like Senegal. I don't want to be like Senegal.
Senator Brown.
Yes, sir.
Senator Brown, the time that you spend on point of order is a part of the hazard of the presentation.
No.
Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, I don't want to be like Senegal. However, let us be clear that in looking at the state of emergency, which is aimed at dealing with crime, I must recognize that as corrosive as crime is, so too is corruption. And I am seeing in this government the most corrupt government in the history of the country. That's what I am seeing. I am seeing corruption all over. I have asked about the UDC land. I've asked about the UDC land sale. I'm raising question about Nestle. I'm raising question about nutrition product limited. I'm raising question about the Universal Service Fund. I'm talking about the corruption that is being condoned at the highest level of this government. That's my concern.
As there was a state of emergency for.
It can't be to lock up the liquor man. It cannot be to be locking up the liquor man under the state of emergency. But the big kingfish of crimes. Look at down in Montego Bay. Person of interest with the shootout, 3-hour shootout. Oh no, we can't hold that person. Baby dead and gone long time. We're talking about the man who the police declared, just as they declare Smoker a person of interest. So, Mr. President, my concern is about the conflict. Yes, Smoker is dead. No, it's not you. Mr. President, the Prime Minister has asked us to support this resolution. I would be benefited in my decision making if the Prime Minister shows courage, show good character in firing the Minister of Energy, who has refused to resign. My concern, Mr. President, is that the Prime Minister comes across to the country as weak and indecisive, and that Wakandaism is alive and well in the government. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I stand to give my support to the extension of the state of emergency in St. Catherine North for a further 3 months. And in fact, you know, we have been in the Senate in relation to St. Catherine North earlier and in respect to St. James. And in coming here today and looking at what took place in the lower house, I just asked myself, how comes this becomes such a debatable issue? How comes it becomes such a debatable issue? I find it strange. Because when we look at Mr. President, at what existed in St. James and in St. Catherine North prior to the state of emergency. And when we give consideration to what has taken place since the declaration of state of emergency in those two areas, I don't think that we should have to come here and have any long debate on an extension in St. Catherine North. And I found it more surprising and interesting when in listening to the discussion in the lower house that two members of parliament from the parish of St. Catherine, one from North St. Catherine and the other from East St. Catherine, made comments which caused me a lot of concern. Concern because at the time of the vote, one of them refused to vote in support. Refused to vote. You use one word. They abstain. And another that made comments to indicate that never again will she seek to support. Yes, it is all right. It is the right of everyone. And you know, I looked at the reasons, I listened to the comments that were made. And it caused me concern, mister. It caused me concern. It caused me concern for the reasons that were put forward, but also the fact that what you get from the opposition in these different comments that they make to the nation is conflicted and mixed signals. And that is what is being sent out there to persons who have criminal intent. That is what is being sent out there to persons who have criminal intent. And you know, what also gives me concern, Mr. President, is the fact that the recommendation for these states of emergency, it is coming from our law enforcement officers. Senior law enforcement officers, the persons in charge of the Jamaica Defense Force and in charge of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, based on the intelligence that they have. And you know, when I look at what was recommended by the opposition early in the day of the state of emergency, where they had put in, and in fact it is part of the amendment to the regulations today, to say that it should be done, the minister should act in issuing detention orders on the recommendation of those two persons. It gives me great concern. Because on one hand, you are saying, in giving a detention order, act on the recommendation. It is not left to the minister alone. But when they make a recommendation for imposition of state of emergency or an extension of the state of emergency, we are getting the comments which seem to be sending these mixed signals out there. And you know,
Senator Brown and Senator Scarford, let this, things have been going so well,
Mr.
but
President,
when you start to shout across the aisle, it is going to cause a problem. What I'm saying is that when you shout across the aisle, it is going to cause a problem because somebody is going to respond. Let us just try and just go through today, please, without the shouting and interruption. Yes, it's my point of order.
Sorry, Mr. President. The gains of the state of emergency in St. Catherine, they are clear and obvious. The greatest gift to mankind is life. And the fact that so many lives have already been saved speaks volumes and places this issue beyond debate. You know, when I listen to the Member of Parliament for North St. Catherine, it is many. Pardon me? North St. Catherine? Well, Mrs. Nita Edley. So it is not North St. Catherine? The many law-abiding citizens whose lives have been spared, and persons who don't have to live in fear. Contrary to what she is indicating and indicated to this parliament. And you know, the comments where she speaks about it, that it is just the poorest and less unfortunate that is suffering from the state of emergency, Mr. President. I ask myself, when we listen to the murders that were taking place, who are the persons whose doors were being kicked off on a daily basis and their families murdered? The poor and less fortunate. Mr. President, some of the comments that were also made and made here in this Senate, that the state of emergency affects all the activities of the creative industries. That is what was said there. It has been indicated here also in the comments that have been made from across the aisle. Yes, there are certain times that have been imposed under the state of emergency for closing. And it happened in St. James, and as situation became more normalized and brought back to some sanity, we have seen the expansion of those closing times. But you know, when you look at the closing times that are being imposed, how far off are they from closing times that already exist under normal circumstances? The Noise Abatement Act specifies a closing time. In St. James, we started off at a particular time in respect to clubs. It has been extended to 2 o'clock. The noise abatement time specified is 12 o'clock during the week and 2 o'clock on weekends, with the exception of a Sunday, which is back at the 12 o'clock. The Spirit License Act, the Spirit, was it you, sir? You know, and at the time when the Noise Abatement Act, if my memory serves me correct, it came under PNP administration. Yes. The Spirit License Act, Mr. President, that speak to bars, taverns, and so forth. They have closing times, and they are not far off. And in fact, in order to get an extension to 2 o'clock under the Spirit License Act as amended, you have to apply for a permit. And if you have violence taking place in a community, all it is that the superintendent is going to say is that you don't get a permit. So you cannot exceed the normal closing time, which when you look on the legislation is sometime about 11 o'clock. So when you look on the times that have been given under the state of emergency, it starts out at an earlier time, but the police have expanded it as things become normalized. And the commitment that was given in this parliament by the Honorable Prime Minister would indicate that that is also going to be a similar situation that arises in St. Catherine. And you know, I'll just say to the persons who have the concern, in St. James, if you drive around St. James and look on the approved areas for placement of party signs and so forth, parties are being held on a regular basis, permits are being granted. And what you find the patrons doing, what you find the promoters doing, is making their adjustment. Making the adjustment, and the adjustment that is being made, because we have gotten so used to having parties that go right into the early morning of the following day. In fact, you have parties that start at 4 o'clock, unusual, and probably that is what would contribute to some of the health concerns that we have in the nation. Persons not getting the right time to sleep. And what it also contributes to, when you look at it from the municipal corporation's point of view, is that these locations don't get a time to restore themselves. So the cleaning capacity of the National Solid Waste is impacted because they have persons out there operating, having street parties, having events, going right through the night. There is no time when the locations are able to restore themselves and be clean. So when I hear the comments as they come that speak to these closing times and how it is hampering business, yes, there is some inconvenience, but adjustments can be made. This is not a long-term measure. It is clear. It has been said that it won't ever be a long-term measure, and 6 months is not any long time. When we reflect on what happened in 1976, in 1976 we weren't talking about 3 months or 6 months. The state of emergency went way beyond that and had greater deleterious impact upon people. You know, Mr. President, I also heard the Member of Parliament saying we need a comprehensive crime plan that allows Jamaicans to feel safe and that can indeed return us to the days when we can in fact sleep with our windows and doors open. Everybody agrees with that. I wish we could return in a short space of time, to 1962, when you considered probably in St. James, there probably may have been less than 10 murders, if so much, in St. James. You know? So, in February of 2016, Mr. President, this administration was given a 5-year mandate, and certain commitments were made to the Jamaican people, and this administration is taking a strategic, holistic, and comprehensive approach to fighting crime. This approach, Mr. President, is one which will ensure that it is sustained and we never revert to the high crime rate that has plagued us for many years. So when you reflect on what the latest state of emergency, the one that occurred in Tivoli, and the decrease in the murders that it had, because it had an impact right across the nation, and the administration that came in 2011, end of 2011, going into 2012, benefited from that reduction. But what we saw right after that, because nothing was done in any holistic, strategic way to ensure that it was sustained, that those gains were sustained, is that you saw a gradual increase between 2012, and I've read out the statistics here, specifically in relation to St. James, but if we look at it as a nation, we had the increases that went between 2012 right up to 2016, when the administration changed, and carried over into 2017. 20% increase year to year. What we have seen with the state of emergency is that we are seeing a trending down, and the reports have been given. Some persons are saying that it is not enough. We must compare the present reduction to 2015. But then, you know, I find the argument contradictory, because when it was increasing, they were comparing it to the previous year to year. They're not asking us to just look at it to 2015. We will get there, Mr. President. It is trending in the right direction. And, you know, I listened to the comments of the leader of opposition business to say that we should test whether it has worked, the success of it, by just lifting it. Mr. President, as I have said, this government, this administration, led by Andrew Holness, is dealing with this in a strategic, holistic way. It can't be that we are just going to be putting in and taking out just for the purpose of a test. Can't be. And, you know, we didn't just get up and say that we are relying on divine intervention. Because as I have said here before, this administration, and we accept the power of prayer, you know. We accept the power of prayer. But it cannot just be, say, let me call out for divine intervention. It cannot be. God helps those who help themselves, Mr. President. And I would just recommend...
Mr. President, on a point of order. Mr. President, on a point of order. On a point of order, Mr. President. Is the minister, is the member, is the senator?
You know that I can rule on the point of order.
Yeah, I want you to, so you can only get to hear it. Is the minister, is the member, is the senator?
Point of order, point of order.
Hang on, 1 minute, 1 minute. Senator Sinclair, turn off your microphone so I can hear it.
I just wanted to know, in that comment about the member from the other place about divine intervention, if the senator is saying that it is better to rely on the Obiaman uncle than on the divine. I just want to be clear.
Senator Sinclair, continue, please.
So, Mr. President, what I would urge.
1 minute.
No, my point of order on that is this. That
Knight, you have a point of order?
yes.
Okay.
That the member, I think unwittingly, you're misleading the Senate, because the then minister never ever said that there should be a reliance simply on divine intervention.
Tonight, could you raise that during your contribution, please, because it's not a point of order.
It is. Misleading the House is a point. Look here. You notice I don't get boisterous? I don't get boisterous.
All right, Senator Knight, no doubt you're going to make a contribution. Deal with it in the contribution for me.
However, the record must show that someone recognized that the Senate was being misled.
Okay. What you can do is deal with that in your contribution. Senator Sinclair.
I will deal with the issue, but the point that I made is the point I want to make now, not later.
Senator Sinclair.
Mr. President, I will say that this administration recognizes the power of prayer. It is not our intention to rely on divine intervention. This administration appreciates the saying that God helps those who help themselves. And in this regard, Mr. President, in this regard, I would urge upon the members of Parliament from St. Catherine who spoke in the lower house from the opposition, that they should take time out to read the sectoral presentation of the Honourable Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, following on from Minister Robert Montague, which confirms this administration's commitment to an all-encompassing program aligned to the 5-pillar strategy for crime prevention and citizen security. And some of these are going to be prioritized. Some aspects of it, Mr. President, will be pursued to improve citizen security. And these were enunciated briefly by the leader of government business: restoring public order and law enforcement, amendments to the anti-gang legislation to make it more effective, targeted social intervention measures in volatile communities, the transformation of the police force into a modern service, and anti-corruption strategies. And, you know, yes, anti-corruption strategies. And, Mr. President, briefly on this matter, you know, we must not only talk the talk, you know. We must not only talk the talk, but we must also walk the walk. And, you know, I heard Senator Brown across the floor making reference to the Integrity Commission and to MOCA doing their work and going into a particular agency. And this administration has no problem with that. The Prime Minister has said it. The Prime Minister has said it, and he has indicated in no uncertain terms that they do their work, and he has no direction as to how they are to do their work. And once the determinations are made and the facts are put out there, then he will, if needs be, deal with the particular issue. The Prime Minister has made that clear. Mr. President, it was this administration, since I sat in this Honorable Senate, that passed the Integrity Commission Act and passed the MOCA legislation. So this administration, Mr. President, this administration has said in no uncertain terms that we are against corruption. You can't have it better than that. Yes. Cannot have it better than that. And I won't go through this too because I don't think we should end up there in the Senate that you're going to be throwing and we're going to be throwing over there. We are acting in relation to dealing with corruption in a very serious way and have put in place the institutions to deal with corruption and let the chips fall where they may. Mr. President, you know, I've heard the comments about transparency and accountability. Transparency and accountability, very important. But then I ask myself, on which side of the fence does a member of parliament sit that took out an injunction to prevent a commission of parliament laying its report on the table of parliament?
Point about it. I grew up in an environment that says what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I heard several interventions when Senator Brown was speaking as to what does this have to do, they asked, with the emergency powers resolution. What does this have to do with it? And you, Mr. President, had said that had there not been an intervention from one of the senators, you were about to intervene. And I suspect that
Kelly, I think you should
in my situation
Kelly,
here,
sorry, I think the Deputy President has distracted the President, so you may have to repeat it. No. You may be listening, I don't think you heard what he was saying.
yes. You know, I won't get detention.
Senator Knight, address me, please. The point of order is in relation to the question of relevance.
Indeed.
Thank you.
I just remind
Well, I'm going to deal with it in a precisely the same manner that I've dealt with the earlier ones.
Thanks.
Senator Sinclair, you need to stick to a discussion of the motion and do not further require my intervention during the course of your presentation.
Mr. President, Mr. President, you know, Senator Brown had indicated that sometimes you wonder where these resources may end up. It relates to criminality. And the whole issue of what has been presented as from the Honourable Minister in relation to things that are being put in speaks to just ensuring that there is transparency and accountability. And, you know, when we look at, if we were to go back to St. Catherine and look at the particular benefits that have derived to the municipal corporation, where they are able to garner through a state of emergency funds which we know end up in the coffers of the municipal corporation and is not used elsewhere or used in other ways. All we have to do is guarantee that it is used in a transparent and accountable way. And, Mr. President, the benefits that have derived from the states of emergency, the action that this administration has taken, looking on the issues in a holistic way, it is my submission that we should not look at it as an event. It is just part of the whole process to ensure that we get to where we need to get to, so that the windows and doors, a commitment made to this nation by the Honorable Prime Minister, is one that will be fulfilled within the time given. If it so pleases you, Mr. President, those are my submissions.
Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Senator Knight.
Pardon?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Senator Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President. Each time we sit, I hear these words: Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding. We thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And when I hear them, I take them seriously, because I believe in that which is written here, and I believe in that prayer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This is divine intervention to direct us. And guide us, not in some, but in all our consultations. So that if we believe that as mortals we are capable of solving all these multitudinous problems on our own, we are mistaken. And so I ask seriously, honestly, for divine intervention in helping us to solve this problem that has beset us for so long. Lord, have mercy on us. President, we are debating the emergency powers number 2 continuance number 2 resolution 2018. And my friend, my learned friend, the leader of opposition business, Senator Motley, referred to the first paragraph, and so do I. And it is saying that the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. Let me put it this way. If one wakes up in the morning with a headache, the first inclination is to take one of your favorite painkillers, like a Panadol or aspirin or Aleve or one of them. And the likelihood is that the headache is going to go away. That's the likelihood. But then come midday, the headache is coming back, and you take some more aspirins or whatever the painkiller may have been. And what happens? You keep on taking, but that does not solve your problem. There's an underlying cause for that headache. And unless that underlying cause is treated, then the headache is going to continue. Or you're going to continue having stop-gap measures. And this is what is happening here. You know, I'm being called on to support this. And I'm going to support it by not voting against it. But I have a difficulty, a great difficulty, because it says any person or body of persons who have threatened to do some acts of such a nature and so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. My issue is this. On what basis, what objective basis am I supporting this? Yes, I like the fact that there is a reduction, and everyone of goodwill must. But the underlying cause is not being treated. And this is what is happening in this case. That's why you have extension after extension after extension. For example, the leader of government business has asked for the support of the side. But the basis for the support has not been given. Because I don't know if the threat by a person or the threat by a body of persons, if that threat is being dealt with. How would I know? I would know if in the presentation I had been told that, look, the threat was being carried out by a body of persons who formed themselves into a gang or into several gangs. And what has happened is that we have reached a distance in dismantling the gangs. And then I would know now that something concrete and capable of being lasting is being done. But I don't get that. I don't get that. I have no information which says that we have arrested the person, or we have arrested and charged some of the persons, and therefore the cause is being removed. Is it that because I'm taking the tablet, my headache ceases? And so because we have a plethora of police and soldiers in the area, then the criminal activity, there's a cessation of that. Is that it? And if that is so, what then is the plan to sustain that presence, to treat with the cause? I need to know. I need to know, for example, if I'm going to be called on, and I would do it. I'm not in any way inviting it, but I would do it. To pay $2 more taxes because we're going to increase the police force. We're going to increase the military so that areas can have consistent, sustained police presence, because we have found out that when there is a police presence, the crime goes down. Is that it? I don't know. Because it is said that if the government tells me, then we're telling the criminals. Well, quite frankly, that is a kind of reasoning that is so warped, so ridiculous, that it ought to be rejected out of hand. And I think that is what moved members of the private sector to have rejected the view that a plan is not needed. We need to know. Why is it a secret that you're going to increase the security forces, the number? Can't be a secret. Tell me. Then it goes on and it says that if there is going to be an extension exceeding a particular period of time, both houses of parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each house. May determine. So I am called on to exercise a judgment. So it's not a matter where you just bring the resolution and I just say yes. There must be a basis on which I'm saying yes. We're not doing it by rote. May determine. In other words, it's discretionary. So let me tell you, I am asking, please, because you're going to return. You're going to return. But when you return, do not return with a frothy approach. Return with a well thought out approach where there is information being given on which I can make a determination, not just to follow the leader. It can't work that way. It can't. Let me tell you. If I should say that I do not have enough information on which to exercise my judgment and so determine in my own mind that there should be an extension. I'll be castigated out in the society by some. Castigated certainly in the Senate. I'm supporting criminals. I'm supporting criminals if I don't vote to extend it. And that ridiculous comment would resonate with some. They would even put it into a partisan package and say, oh, you're just playing party politics. No, I'm not. I'm not. The days of dealing with crime fighting with brawn, those days are gone. You have to now fight crime with brains. Systematic. And one of the things that would be needed is a plan. I am hoping that the Prime Minister has moved away from his position stated some time ago when he was in opposition, that the then Minister of National Security was speaking nonsense by talking about public involvement, calling on the nation to be involved. It was an abdication of the minister's responsibility in the assessment of the then leader of the opposition, now Prime Minister, for that to have been said. So here I am, crying out in the wilderness. How can I help? How can I help? And all I'm told is, if you see a crime being committed, don't hide it. Tell the police. That's the only help I can give. That's the only help you require of me. Not to support anything else. If I don't see a crime being committed, I can't help in crime fighting. I don't know, should I be active in helping to form citizens groups committed to the fight against crime? I don't know. Because if the Prime Minister tells me that according to his reasoning, then that is an open declaration to criminals as to what the plan is. Prime Minister, I know you.
Mr. President, the time being 1:20, might the standing orders be suspended to allow us to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day?
Well, actually, the time being 1:21. The question is that the question is that the time being approximately 1:20, that the Senate be allowed to sit 1:30 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
Prime Minister, I know you. I served in the lower house with you. Move away from where you were and get to the point where you should be. And the point where you should be is to develop a plan which will involve citizens. Involvement of citizens, because the government alone can't do it. The Minister of National Security alone can't do it. The police alone can't do it. The soldiers and the police together can't do it. They cannot. Listen to the private sector. They cried out and said, we didn't have any involvement when it was being said that they were involved. They said, we're not involved, we don't know about it. So, the private sector, they, apart from government, can play the largest and most significant role in the reduction of crime. Take them into your confidence, work with them, develop a plan, and put it out to the Jamaican people. This is what the government has come up with, along with private sector interests. Because, you know, under what is it, Zozo, you talk about intervention. It's not new. It's not new. But there can be a new approach. The intervention program that is being run now started in the 1990s. That's when it started. I know. I was there. Two of them. One IDB, one CEDA. But I have said here before, and I'm going to say it again. Use the example of Boston, where the mayor, the governor of Massachusetts, and the private sector came together and solved a serious problem that had beset Boston in particular. People want work. Work can't only be coming from government. Can't. The government is being called on to cut expenditure in terms of paying wages. I heard, for example, the leader of government business, she said you can't have community policing unless you have quietude, so to speak, in communities. Pardon me? Well, you see, that's why you need a plan, because what you just say is wrong. It's wrong. Because there may be a misunderstanding of what community policing is. Community policing is not just having some police walking up and down the street or driving up and down. Community policing means an involvement in the affairs of the community. Started with a man named Lee Brown in New York City and continued. Giuliani adopted it. Community policing includes where the police are part, for example, depending on the nature of the community, the JAS. They are part of organizations and institutions within the community. They're part of the PTA. They are involved. They are assisting old people to get to clinics. That's community policing. That's where then the police begin to win the hearts and minds and trust of the people. That's what we're talking about. We had some pilot projects on it. One in Southside and some other places. And the other side, what name? Tel Aviv? Yeah. in central Kingston. That's what you're talking about. And it got to be sustained. What happens now? I don't know. I used to have a word or two with Minister Montague, and we talk about programs like that. I don't hear about them since he has gone. That's another problem we have. You change a minister, and a program like that, gone. Gone. So you have to then have something there to which you're working. And whether it be Minister X or Minister Y, you're working to that because it goes beyond the immediate. It covers the immediate, but it goes beyond. And it goes beyond mere policing. And I don't think that that's clearly understood, because I heard a commentator, he was on one of them TV shows, and he says, people like KD Knight asking for plan, and he spoke derisively. And I said to myself, my gosh, how could he? He's one of the intellectuals in the society. So somebody said to me, redefine intellectual. But I'm not going to. I still regard him as an intellectual. You raised that? Let me answer you. Let me tell you what happened. I had organized my people. Yes? Organize them. Driving on the road, people would shout out to me, Mr. Knight, I'm with you. Our KD Knight, I'm with you. Our Star Boy, I'm with you. Our Sheriff, I am with you. You follow me? And then I heard in the lower house a statement when the extension was being debated for the St. James state of emergency. I heard my party leader say that he was giving the government 3 months. And so I called it off, because I didn't think it would be right for the party leader to be saying, I'm giving you 3 months, because they were involved, I think, in Vale Royal's talks and so on. And then I go out there like I'm doing some one-upmanship and, you know, do it. That's why I didn't do it. That's why I didn't do it. But let me tell you, it's a phone call only. And after I make the phone call, I just have to step out. And all I'm going to hear, and you going to hear, see step of that, and step of that.
Right, stepper.
Stepper is one who steps. Well, if you don't like stepper, there's another term, but I don't use it. So, President, in closing, I will say this. I am not going to vote against this. I believe that reason will prevail, and that we will have a plan that will galvanize the Jamaican people, wake us up and say every single Jamaican is involved in the fight against crime, and it is not simply calling the police when you see something. That's not it. And of course, I know, I don't know who else believes it, but I know that in the fight against corruption, even if it takes some time, one night, when the Prime Minister goes to his bed with his windows open, and he wakes up the next morning, he will step up to the plate and say, I, Andrew Michael Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, will not accommodate in the highest policy-making body in the country anyone who transgresses the rules relating to good governance. And so one of you should replace one of them who is going to be put out. So just wait.
Minister? Thank you, Senator Knight. Senator Morrison.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there must be no mixed signal in the fight against crime, because criminals are very clear and strategic in their plans. And I just want to quote a song so that some of us may understand, a song from Mali, cause sandals are no back to. The thugs them would do what them got to, and they won't think twice to shot you. Don't make them spot you, unless you carry guns a lot to. A beer tough things come at you. And I'm going to put in something here now. When Spaintown man stop laugh and block off traffic, then them wheel and pop off and them start clap it. With the pin file down and it a beat rapid. Police come in a jeep and them can't stop it. I say very strongly, whether it be one order or clans, the point is we stand against criminality. That's the point. Yes. And Mr. President, I say very strongly that if this state of emergency is proving effective, this government will not hesitate to use it, because protecting our citizens is our priority. Mr. President, we thank the citizens. We thank the citizens of the St. Catherine North Division for cooperating with the security forces and the patience shown at the different checkpoints. We also thank the security forces for treating the citizens with respect. Their conduct so far is commendable. Mr. President, the state of emergency is a necessary intervention to fight rampant criminality in the specified zone. The aim is that citizens may enjoy the peace to go about their daily business without fear. Mr. President, Mr. President, we know that livelihood is affected. All the people that dance, the round robin, other businesses that depend on these events, but we ask the citizens to continue to support the state of emergency so that they can live in peace, live with dignity, live without fear, and even have more successful businesses. We are happy to report that murders and shootings, it's down by 26% within the zone. And for this reason, many citizens, including those who have businesses, embrace the state of emergency. It is not true that people do not accept it. My neighbors love the state of emergency. I live there. The taxi men love the state of emergency. Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, listen. Vibes Cartel, Mr.
Senator
President.
Senator Brown, don't bother with the shouting across the aisle, please.
Mr. President, Vibes Cartel did a song where you know about pressure. And the aim of that song, Mr. President, is basically to show that there are some of us who are so far removed from the pulse of the people, the reality. So we probably just sit in some fanciful space and legislate. Damian Marley, one line from that song, Welcome to Jamrock. Some boy, them only come around like tourists. This government is not like that. We are on the ground with the people. We know the pain of the people. We know the suffering of the people. Mr. President, there are some of us who probably don't know what it is like to see some boy walking through them community with some high-powered weapon. That's the reality of their life. Some people don't know what it is like, Mr. President, to be in their beds and hear gunshot a beat. I am from Spanish Town. I am aware of that reality, Senator Charles. I had to put my bed on some blocks so that I can hold underneath the bed because with the size, I can't slide under the bed so easily. That's the reality, Mr. President. Yes. No. Mr. President. No. We have heard sustained. We have heard sustained criticism of this government. Sustained criticism. But I just want to very gently point out, Senator Charles, that if the previous administration had a strategic and sustainable approach in the fight against crime, we would not be having these challenges today. Mr. President, you talk about Wakanda. Senator Samuda, I want to hear about FinSAC. That's what I'm waiting to hear. They are making the link. A wonderful link was made this morning by Senator Brown. I'm actually happy that he went there, where he linked crime, corruption, production. And I just want to point out that FinSAC is said to have wiped out a generation of entrepreneurs, and our society has struggled ever since. In fact, Mr. President, it is described as the wickedest act against Jamaica today.
Stick to the,
no,
stick to the,
and I'm
stick
sticking
to
it, Mr. President. But a prayer, colleague, a prayer was quoted. The prayer that we all read here, it was quoted. Excellent, Senator Knight. But I just want to go to that section of the prayer. That section of the prayer that says, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all prejudices and partial affections, the result of which may be to the glory of thy blessed name. So, Mr. President, we are here to stamp out corruption, and in that the balance must be maintained. We don't want it to be, oh, look what you did, look what you did, look what you did. We are against corruption regardless of where it comes from. Corruption is corruption. Corruption is corruption. Mr. President. Mr. President, hold on a minute. Mr. President, you talk about, hold on. We don't want to have to say to the marshal, usher him out. We don't want to go there today. Mr. President, we talk about who we should fire. Listen to me. Coming from Spanish Town, should I take that line? I would say let us consider what is happening in the Manchester Municipal Corporation. It is a shame. It is a shame listening to a voice note that says it is full time that PNP has integrity. I am not supporting anybody with any sticky finger. You know what that $90 million could do for Spanish Town? It could improve the market. We could get new stall. We could, I am going right along the line where Senator Brown, right? You started it, Senator Brown. Now, Mr. President, I stand with the people of St. Catherine. Spain Town is my town. That is where I go to shop. That's where I go to market. That's where I go to hairdresser. That's where I take taxi. And I put it to you that Spain Town has the best barber, the best hairdresser, the best mechanic, the best jerk chicken area. Spanish Town has good, decent citizens who deserve to live in peace. This Spanish Town, St. Catherine North Division, it has good, decent, hard-working citizens, men and women of integrity who deserve to live in peace. Mr. President, the citizens in St. Catherine North Division look forward to a time when there will be no need for a state of emergency. Mr. President, there has been times when Spanish Town locked down, shooting in public spaces, and the town becomes a ghost town. If you're in the town and shut a fire, just run with the crowd. No, Mr. President, this cannot continue to happen. Spanish Town should be a big money earner in our society. Mr. President, Spanish Town is a town that is rich with history, a town with tremendous potential, and I'm encouraging my government to look at Spanish Town, look at St. Catherine North Division for future investment. Mr. President, I support the state of emergency for the advantage and benefit to the people of the St. Catherine North Division. And I say to the people in St. Catherine North Division, to the people of Spanish Town, be patient. The time is coming when you are going to enjoy the quality of life that you richly deserve. Prosperity will be yours. May it so please you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
1 minute, Senator Morris. You don't want the lectern?
No.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Morris, go ahead, please.
Mr. President, I rise to make my brief intervention to this resolution that seeks to extend the state of public emergency for St. Catherine North. And, Mr. President, I have sat and I have listened to the debate. And I was forced to make my intervention based on the last presenter because I am certain that in passing this resolution, it requires consensus and it requires cooperation from those of us on this side. And for any individual to stand in this Parliament and give the impression as if the members on this side condones and supports criminality.
Very close. You went very close.
For anyone to give the impression that members on this side would be disingenuous, because as members of Her Majesty's loyal opposition and as the body that the citizens of this country have been trusted to ensure that we hold the government accountable, we on this side, Mr. President, have a duty and a right to be critical and to highlight wherever we see that there are violations of the rights of the citizens. We have a right and a duty to do so. And if it is that a member of Parliament for her constituency who elects her to represent her in the Parliament sees transgression of the rights of her constituents, she have a duty to come to the Parliament and speak about it. She have a duty, and if she chooses not to vote and support the extension, it is her right, Mr. President. It is her right. And you know, I hear a member somewhere talking about people wanting to muzzle them into not speaking. And I am getting the feeling that some people don't want us to speak. I get. But Mr. President, the fact is that we do support. Well, let me correct. I have to now start to think. Because Mr. President, we do support the fight. We do support the fight against criminality. We support the fight against criminality. And for us on this side, the fight against criminality, the fight against criminality doesn't start and end in terms of gun violence and gang violence. Criminality is a much broader term for us. And so when Senator Brown speaks about the whole situation of corruption, We know that corruption, Senator Webby, is a major, major crime. Major, major crime. Because it robs and sucks away vital and critical resources that would go into dealing with some of the challenges of the poor and the most vulnerable within our society. So when we ask for a crime plan, we know that a crime plan is going to have different components. And one of the components that exists within a crime plan is how you tackle and deal with the social amenities within our society. Yes? Some of the things you said could have not been said too. The fact of the matter is, Mr. President, social amenities, or the lack thereof, is one of the major contributors to crime. But the reason why we don't have the social amenities that we want to have is because government have been strapped for cash. But when it is that people see and hear, government say, boy, we don't have the money to do this, or the money to do that. And then they hear of some of the allegations. When they hear of some of the allegations, wherever and whenever, they are forced to take the law into their own hands. And you're not condoning what none of them engage in. But, Mr. President, the fact of the matter is that there is an intimate link between criminality and corruption. And that is what Senator Brown has sought to highlight, to show that what is taking place in Jamaica today is a part of the problem that we have to deal with. And it requires urgent attention from the highest authority and the individual who is vested with the ultimate authority in the form of the Prime Minister to deal with those problems. Because it speaks to decisiveness and it speaks to the restoration of confidence in our governance process. You see, the fact of the matter, Mr. President, a lot of times we talk about why is it that citizens are abstaining from the political process? Why is it that we are not seeing more individuals getting involved in the political process? It's because a lot of the people look at us who are involved and say all of them are thieves and all of them do the same thing. And so they stay away from the process. We have to take tough decisions that will ensure that we restore confidence in the system and let people understand that we don't tolerate criminality in no shape or form in our country. And so, Mr. President, whilst I make known my clear and unequivocal stance when it comes on to crime and violence, I have said in this parliament before that we need to make sure that we put in place a sustainable plan, that we don't have to come to Parliament every minute asking for an extension of state of emergency. And I know that Senator Knight has thrown down the gauntlet. But I tell you, Mr. President, it cannot be that we are going to use the state of emergency as crafted in the Constitution as the weapon, as to fight crime in our country. It can't be. Whilst you were speaking on your feet, I heard a lot of members there uttering sort of a share and saying that if it requires the state of emergency to deal with the crime, then so be it. So what am I to understand from that? That this thing can go on for eternity. And I am not in for that in terms of suspending the constitutional rights of our citizens to tackle and deal with the crime over a long-term period. It can't be. It can't be. And I must say, Mr. President, you know, I hear the references to individuals, to corruption and scandals and all of that sort of thing. And when I hear it, I shake my head, because I am certain, Senator Brown, that I cannot recall any member from this side here having gone to spend time in short pants. And yes, and I hope the younger members of that side, I hope that members of that side will check the history where that is concerned. All right? Senator Morrison, I heard you mention FinSac. I'm going to ask you again, please, to do the reading on FinSac and what it is and what it was for. Because FinSac never wipe out. FinSac never wipe out those companies that you are talking about. That was not what FinSac was about.
Borrowed money or repaid.
All right? So you need to make sure that you check the facts. But Mr. President, I look forward to us containing the level of criminality in our country, because Jamaica is what is suffering from all of this. And all of us in this country are vulnerable based on the level of criminality that is taking place. You know, Mr. President, and I heard Senator Gale made reference to it. In St. Mary, murders was something that happened with any regularity in St. Mary, you know. But now we see that happening with frequency. I mean, when you look at a town such as Annotto Bay, just the other day we got up and we heard of a whole community moving away from a whole community of people moving out of the area because of what was taking place. And I think it was Sunday, I heard of a major shootout down there with police and gunmen. You see what is happening as the crime intensifies and you have a state of emergency in a particular area, the criminals begin to move out and occupy elsewhere. So you see a shift taking place in terms of criminal activities elsewhere. And so all of us, Mr. President, whether we are our family or our friends, are exposed. And we have to do everything to make sure that we eliminate it and eradicate it from our society. And I'm looking forward to the successful completion of this debate on this resolution. And at that time, I will determine, based on how I see the debate goes.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Senator Charles, please.
Mr. President, I've had the opportunity, Mr. President, to listen to my colleagues, and in particular, having the honor to hear what I consider to be an awesome and distinguished submission by my colleague and friend, Senator Clarencia Stargirl Morrison, is very important for all Jamaicans that are listening to take note of her words. And she leaves us with not much more to say, because she has been able to identify the central issue. Spanish Town has good, decent people who deserve our best. And that is what we must remember today. And I stand here to support, Mr. President, this resolution, not in isolation, not thinking of it as a one-off solution, but with the understanding, Mr. President, that there will come a time for the state of emergency to end, but now is not that time. Jamaicans, Mr. President, have to face our reality, which was created by us. And whether it is us individually or not, we have the responsibility to solve the problem. It requires, Mr. President, that we bind together. It requires us, Mr. President, first and foremost, to understand the problem. Mr. President, the problem of crime and violence in Jamaica is frequently referenced as a cancer. And when I listen to my colleagues in the opposition, I understand their frustration. I hear their concerns. But I cannot agree. Because when we simply evaluate the state of emergency as if it is in its own place, the solution that the government is presenting, we do not do justice to the collaboration that we need to move Jamaica forward. What the Ministry of National Security has articulated time and time again, and what the Prime Minister has also led and affirmed, is that we have a whole government approach to crime reduction, which does not only include increased mobility, increased efficiency, increased police, but is connected to every single ministry and sector. Because we have realized, Mr. President, that we're dealing with a cancer that has passed early stages, a cancer that requires so many different remedies, whether it is surgery or chemotherapy. We even need acupuncture, alternative medicines, anything that you can do to stay alive. Because Spanish Town deserves it. We have good, decent people who deserve our best. And our star girl put it correctly. And I am pleased to know that Senator Lambert Brown and my colleagues, despite any statements made, I know that they want the best for Jamaica. And that is why they're supporting the extension of the state of emergency. And I know there is trepidation, Senator Brown. And I hear you, because it is automatic that we wouldn't want something that is a state of emergency to be continued in perpetuity. But if we internalize the problem, Mr. President, I am willing to do anything I have to do, Senator Webby, for as long as I have to do it in order to stay alive. I don't think that the measurement of our success or continuance of an activity should be whether it is done for 3 months or 3 years. It should be how it is being operated and if it is being effective. The quality of the operation. And there's something that we haven't heard anybody reject, which is the notion that the way the Jamaica Constabulary Force and the Jamaica Defense Force are operating this has been at the highest level of professionalism. And we must commend the Jamaica Constabulary Force. We must commend the JDF. And I recall that my colleague Senator, I believe it's Donna Scott Motley, also commended them.
Good point, Senator Charles.
We are not here as a government picking rabbits out of a hat. We're not putting our hand in and saying we want a solution to crime. Woof, this one today. Woof, this one tomorrow. Mr. President, since March 2016, our most honorable Prime Minister, Andrew Michael Holness, has held more meetings of the National Security Council. He has led from the front. He has pulled together a national security advisor who has assisted. We have put more allocation to the budget in the Ministry of National Security to ensure that this is not talk, is action. National security is the priority. And Mr. President, let me tell you, I want to make reference, as stated by our Prime Minister in the House of Representatives, Senator Skeffrey. I want you to listen carefully. The next phase of our operations is not so much to go and detain the cornermen. The next phase of the operation is to use the space created, the networks that we have uprooted to get the mastermind and kingpins. We are in a different phase, and you will start to see the impacts in months to come. Mr. President, in the presentation in the lower house, the Prime Minister mentioned that to date there is a 26% reduction in the incidence of murder and shooting in the St. Catherine North Division over the same period last year. The people of St. Catherine are good, decent people who deserve the best. Listen to Senator Morrison. She's saying it. She's on the ground. We are not hovering up there. And I said it, Mr. President, let me take off my glasses for this one and open my suit. In the last submission I made in this house, in this honorable house, I welcomed my colleagues. I said, come with me, let us walk through the state of emergency and the zones of special operations. I said, come out of your seat, get out of the AC, let's go on the ground. Mr. President, I am on the ground. Our star girl is on the ground. We are all over. We're not coming here to tell you what we think. We're coming here to tell you what we know, because we're listening to the people. We're listening to the people. My grandmother said, Senator Brown, that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And this government has made sure that we are making the decisions that are responsible for our people. I mentioned also that when it comes on to put in our money where our mouth is, over 500 vehicles, 528 vehicles today have been purchased for the Ministry of National Security. More than $1 billion has been used to increase the mobility in this country and deliver. And I can say to you that you have another 41 vehicles coming before the end of next month. Mr. President, the reality is, whether you like it or not, whether you support it or not, the truth doesn't change whether you're loud or whether you're soft. The truth is that this government has shown, it has demonstrated responsibly that we are going to put our money where our mouth is. We have allocated the money, we have distributed the vehicles, we have increased the capacity for recruiting, we have introduced polygraphing, we have used polymetric tests to raise the standard of individuals entering the force. And Mr. President, I tell you this, I have seen for the first time in my lifetime an approach and a leadership when it comes on to our national security. To know that we are not talking about buying vessels to protect our border, but we are now here proudly as senators able to say that we have bought them. To know that we are here no longer speaking about, boy, you know, we have to buy a plane. But we have already put the money down and we are fitting it and we're going to have it to complement the vessels to protect our borders. To know, Mr. President, that we are no longer seeing ministers of national security get up and say, boy, we need money, we're not getting the money from cabinet. But instead, what you're seeing is ministers able to articulate that the money has come and what we are doing with it. The introduction, Mr. President, of the state of emergency is one of the suite of solutions that come together to treat this cancer that we call crime and violence. And Mr. President, I tell you this. The cancer that is crime.
I don't believe it. You beat your tongue. You beat your tongue. You beat your tongue when you say that.
Mr. President, if my colleagues would allow me, I want to close by saying one thing. There is something very important,
Senator
Mr. President.
Brown, Senator Charles would like to close. I'm sure you'd like that.
In everything that we do, Mr. President, when I was a boy, I remember that I had no option but to do well. I remember speaking to my classmates and saying to myself, but you had an option to fail. There was no option in my house. In my yard, there was just no option, so it never came to me. It wasn't in my brain. Your mentality, the psychology, how you approach life is very important. I listened to some of my colleagues literally support and then crush the same thing they're supporting. Mr. President, there is a colleague among us who has inspired me more this year, I think, than any Jamaican. She is battling what nobody else can understand. There is something that Jamaica must learn from Sapphire Lamore. I remember speaking to her And her positiveness in confronting what I was scared for my friend, her attitude of defying this evil, her courage in using any means possible to win this battle was more than any chemotherapy, tablet, or any medicine. The minds of our young people and our Jamaicans must be set right. We must assume upon ourselves an attitude like Sapphire. If we do not do that, it doesn't matter how much states of emergencies we have. We are required, Mr. President, to position ourselves not just physically and spiritually, as I've heard Senator Sinclair, but psychologically, mentally. Jamaica must know that we can overcome this cancer. Mr. President, I don't choose my words lightly. I've had family members who have suffered. And I remember also the positive attitude of my grandmother in her battle. And I remember the several things that she had to do. And we are facing this now with crime and violence. Our utterances as the leadership of this country will define how people see themselves. I want to reiterate and reaffirm from my senators, and I'm not just speaking about opposition colleagues, my colleagues on both sides. Join me. Come on the ground. Let us go and speak to the people. If you speak to them, you would echo what Senator Morrison has said. They are good, decent people who deserve exactly what you would want for your children. If it was our children, would we mind if it was extended? Would we be questioning it? Our question would be, is it working? Yes. And the answer to that question is a resounding yes, yes, yes. So I tell you this, Mr. President, for as long as the state of emergency continues to be operated at the level of efficiency and professionalism that I have seen, and for as long as the people who I affirmed to lead and to assist and to guide and to support my Prime Minister in representing, I will continue to support the measures that are protecting our Jamaican people. We must remember what we say and what we do is not only recorded in Hansard. What we say and what we do becomes the platform for those who see us as role models. Mr. President, may we be guided by those leaders among us who have distinguished themselves in their courage and in their determination. That is what is required for us to move Jamaica from where we are to prosperity, if so please you.
Thank you, Senator Charles. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, our Friday afternoons never fail to deliver passion and a strong defense of one's beliefs. And the fact that we may differ on certain matters, certainly, I hope, will not prevent us from uniting on a vote to extend the resolutions placed before us today. Mr. President, I want to thank all members who contributed to the debate at this sitting, because it shows that we think seriously about the issues, notwithstanding, as I've said, any differences. I want to just address a couple points, though. One point raised that gave me some concern was the concern that the only way to test the state of emergency success is to lift it. I understand where the point comes from, or where the suggestion comes from, but I think that the government is appropriately balancing the considerations that while we will undoubtedly test the effectiveness when the state of emergencies are eventually lifted, it must be that if the heads of the security forces are saying to you, now is not the time, we are not there yet, if we raise the state of emergency now, if we lift these measures, we cannot guarantee that we will not lose the gains that we have already made. When that is your advice from the professionals, from the persons with the intelligence, from the persons who are on the ground, it can only be a responsible government that would say, we will go to Parliament and we will seek the extension that you need. Now cannot be the time to test for an academic consideration. We must be guided by those who are responsible and for those we hold accountable, because these are the persons that we hold accountable to deliver the results. We have to give them the tools if we're going to hold them accountable. I think one sentiment that has been expressed today is that we have a responsibility to protect the people. Senator Scott Motley said it. Senator Morrison has said it. Others have said it as well, even if the perspectives are different. But I think what we're quite clear on is that the state of emergency in St. Catherine North has saved and is saving lives. Senator Brown, Senator Knight, pardon me, said he was not convinced, said that we should not come with frothy, I believe was his term, frothy arguments. But we have spoken about the disruption of criminal activity, of gang activity. We have spoken about the reduction in murders and shootings by 26%. We've spoken about a reduction in extortion. And I don't view these things as frothy. And speaking about neighbors being able to stand up outside and talk, speaking about children being able to safely go to school and parents safely able to go about their lawful business, the barbers, the stylists, the jerk chicken man, and all the other entrepreneurs that Senator Morrison spoke to us so feelingly about this afternoon. We must protect their lives as well. We must protect their well-being, and we must deliver a society, a community in which they are able to live without fear. And I don't think that those arguments are frothy, Mr. President. Mr. President, on the matter of community policing, Senator Knight said that I was wrong to say that community policing requires community policing cannot be conducted in circumstances which are ripe for a state of emergency. And with all respect, and I hope he's listening, I'm sure he's listening from where he is, I disagree with him 100%. Yes, community policing involves the police ensuring that they become a part of The community fabric, wonderful. The organizations and the agencies and the committees that form an active and healthy communities activities. But if, as Senator Morrison has described for us, shot is busting in market and the place is a ghost town, the children can't play football, so there is no community club for the police to become a part of. And the community and the police are at war for all sense and purposes, then that is not yet ripe for policing. Community policing is taking place where it is possible and appropriate. But in the jurisdiction where a state of emergency exists, where murders and shooting are still at a level that the police and the soldiers agree is a state of emergency. Of course, people are living, and thank God for that. Thank God for that. But we must do what we can, and we are taking the advice that has been given to us. Mr. President, I don't want to reopen all of the arguments that were put forward today because others have dealt with most of the salient points that were raised. I just want to ask one more time that we recognize on both sides of this House that acting on the advice of the heads of the security forces, it is the belief of the lower house and of this House. We wish to put forward that the regulations as amended and the resolution tabled be approved today. I thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask that the motion be approved.
The question is that the motion designated the Emergency Powers Act, Emergency Powers Number 2, Continuance Number 2, Resolution 2018 be approved. Madam Clerk.
Senator Brown?
Yes.
Senator Brown? He's not here. Senator Charles? Yes. Senator Crawford? Absent. Senator Fraser Binns? Senator Gill? Yes. Senator Hill?
Yes.
Senator Johnson Smith? Aye. Senator Knight? Senator Knight? Senator Knight? Aye or no, sir? Senator Longmore? Senator Morris? Senator Morrison? Senator Reid? Senator Samuda? Senator Scott Motley? Senator Sinclair? Senator Skeffrey? Yes. Senator Slowly? Senator Webby? Yes. Senator Williams? Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I do report the vote as follows. 17 ayes, 0 noes, 0 declined to vote, absent 3. The vote is in favor of the motion. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg for the recommittal of the agenda item notices of motion given orally.
The question is that the agenda item notices of motion given orally be recommitted. Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, I wish to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. The Mutual Assistance Criminal Matters Foreign States Kingdom of Belgium Order 2018 Resolution. Whereas, by virtue of Section 31(2) of the Mutual Assistance Criminal Matters Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, where any relevant treaty has been made with any foreign state by order, declare that the provisions of the Act shall apply in respect of such foreign state. And whereas Jamaica and the Kingdom of Belgium are parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption 2005 and the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime 2000, and whereas on the 8th day of June 2018, the Minister made the Mutual Assistance Criminal Matters Foreign States Kingdom of Belgium Order 2018, declaring that the provisions of the Act shall apply in respect of the Kingdom of Belgium, and whereas it is provided by Section 31(4) of the Act that an order made under that section shall be subject to affirmative resolution, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Mutual Assistance Criminal Matters Foreign States Kingdom of Belgium Order Resolution 2018, and 2. The Mutual Assistance Criminal Matters Foreign States Kingdom of Belgium Order 2018, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 29th day of June 2018, is hereby affirmed. Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today, and I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Just before you do that, Madam Minister, I had indicated that the vote was 17 ayes and 3 absent. It should have read 4 absent. For the record, I wish to correct that. Correct, Madam Clerk? Okay. The question is that the Senate be adjourned at this time for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honorable Senate now stands adjourned.
We had some very good voices. Some voices could have stayed home.
This is the 2018 Jamaica Gospel Song Competition.
Hey!
This is a platform.
I want the message to get across.
God himself, give me the inspiration.
Everybody would love to win.
All we do is win.
Not many persons can say, I won the JCBC Gospel Song Competition.
Most will think domestic violence is a personal issue. Truth is, it affects the entire community. Educate yourself.
Speeding kills. Obey the speed limit. A message from the Road Safety Unit in the Ministry of Transport and Mining.
Did you know that the EU has been doing a lot of work in Jamaica? 397 houses have been built for residents in sugar-dependent communities, replacing the old barracks-type housing in which they used to live.
The condition of the barracks were completely rough.
No light, no water.
We never have any transport. The bathroom is outside bathroom and pit toilet.
We never have no tank. We have a tank.
The lights are here, the bathroom inside, the kitchen inside.
I have running water, flush toilet.
Thank God for the benefit we have right now.
Life sweeter for true with the EU.
It's Friday, June 29. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. The management of ports and aviation systems, student exchanges, and sharing technical expertise in health, sports, and culture will be the focus areas of the joint commission between Jamaica and Panama. An agreement for the establishment of the Joint Commission was signed back in 2016, and it has now been activated. On Thursday, members of both countries' delegations gathered to watch Jamaica's State Minister in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Senator Pernell Charles Jr., and Panama's Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs and Cooperation, Maria Luisa Navarro, ink the formal deal. During the press conference at the ministry's office, Minister Charles said the agreement seeks to provide a framework to foster the exchange of technical expertise.
The concrete proposals that have been put forward will certainly see our two countries moving in the right direction. Indeed, additionally, the personal contacts that have been made will play a major role in addressing the areas of national priority. Undoubtedly, the discussions and agreements arrived at over the course of the past 2 days will